Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to make the free crochet pattern from Lion Brand yarn, the 5.5 hour throw made with Wool Ease Thick and Quick. Here you can see my almost finished blanket. I have a few more fringes left to put on, and then I need to trim them out nice and evenly. But you can see this is a really pretty fabric. Let me get my hand behind here. Nice and open, but with super bulky yarn it works up super fast. So let's get started. Now, as I mentioned, this calls for Wool Ease Thick and Quick, and it also calls for a Q hook. That is sometimes called P, sometimes it's called Q, sometimes it's called size 19, but the important thing to look for is that it's a 15mm hook. That's the hook size you want to use with this yarn for this blanket pattern. So let's get started. All right, so to begin this pattern, according to the written instructions, you will see that you're supposed to start with a chain of 61. Now, I'm not going to make you watch me go through all 61 stitches because that would make for a really long and boring video. So I did figure out the stitch multiple for this pattern. You can start with any multiple of 3 plus 4, which means you can do any multiple of 3, like 3, 6, 9, 12, whatever, on up, 30, 300, and then just add 4 more at the end. So for this little tiny sample here, I have chained 16, which is 4 times 3 plus 4. So let's begin. Now, to begin the first row after you've changed, we're going to skip the first 4 chains. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I like to work into the bottom of the chain, but if you prefer, you can work under the top 2 loops. It's just whichever method you prefer. So I'm going to skip those first 4 and go into the chain after that with a double crochet. Like so. And then those 4 that I skipped, when we come back to these later for the row 2, these are going to count as a skipped chain down here, like we just skipped it all by itself, almost like a skipped stitch. And then the other 3 chains here count as our first double crochet. So just a double crochet hanging out there on the end is how we'll think of that. So we've double crocheted in the 5th chain, then we're going to chain 1 and double crochet back in that same exact chain right in there. Now this double crochet, chain 1, double crochet right here is called a V-stitch. And when you have 61 chains to begin with, you'll end up making 19 of these V-stitches across. So to continue, we're going to skip the next 2 chains, 1, 2, go in the chain after that, and make another V-stitch. And that right there is our basic repeat to get across row 1. We skip 2, go to the next one, double crochet, like so, chain 1, and double crochet right and back in the same stitch, like so, making nice little, you can see the V's right there. Okay, so we keep doing that. When we get to the end, after we make that 19th V, or however many, depending on how many chains you started with, like so, there will be 2 chains left at the end there. So to finish that off, we're going to skip 1 and double crochet in the last. And if you think about it, that kind of mirrors what we did with that 4 we skipped at the beginning. Remember, those counted as a skip a chain and then a double crochet right back here? That's basically what we've done at the end to finish it off. Skip 1 and double crochet. So you can see we've got, for our tiny little swatch here, 4 V-stitches made. If we were making the full-size blanket according to instructions, there'd be 19 with a double crochet on either end. Now from here on out, every row of the pattern is the same. We're going to start and pull up a little bit more yarn. You do run through it quickly with this super bulky yarn. We're going to chain 3. That will count as our first double crochet of row 2. Then we're going to turn, or you can turn first and then chain 3. It doesn't matter, whichever you prefer doing in whatever order. As long as you start turning and working back the other direction here, you'll be okay. So then these V stitches are each going to be worked in the chain 1 space. So that doesn't mean go into the chain 1. You don't have to fiddle going into the chain itself. you just go into that chain space right underneath, the big gap in the middle of the V. Let me pull it out a little bit over the white background here. There you go. Right there is where you're going to put your next V stitch. So we'll yarn over, go right in that space like so, work a double crochet, chain one, and double crochet again. There we are. So you can see we've got a stacked double V-stitch right in the middle of the previous V-stitch in the previous row there. So that's what we're going to continue to do. You don't have to worry about skipping anything, although we're skipping the actual stitches. We're just going to the next V-stitch and put another V-stitch right in that chain one space. Like so. So if we had 4 V-stitches in the previous round, then we should have 4 V-stitches in this round. And that is a very quick and easy way to make sure you're keeping your stitch count with this pattern. So this is my 4th one. So after you make the last V-stitch of the row, and pull up a little bit more yarn here, there we go, you're going to work that last double crochet. Remember, those first chain 3s counted as our first double crochet, then we V-stitch across, then we need a final double crochet to cap it off. So for row 2, it'll be actually in the top of the chain 4, because remember we skipped 4, but you also remember too, those 3 right there count as a double crochet. So we're just going to double crochet right in the top of those chains there, like so. Now, that was row 2, and like I say, the whole rest of the pattern, it goes to 40 rows, is repeating row 2. So you start with a chain 3, V-stitch in each V-stitch across, and finish off with a double crochet in the top of the chain 3. So when you come back across for row 3, when you get to the end, you get that chain 3, you treat it just like a double crochet and put another double crochet right in the top there. Let me pull up a small swatch that I have finished. Here we are. A little bit wider than the camera shows, but you can see, oops, it's upside down. There we go. You can see it's got V stitches on top of V stitches and a double crochet or a chain 3 that represent a double crochet at each end, like so. Now, the reason I made this swatch is so I can show you what to do after you've crocheted those 40 rows. If you like your blanket just worked with just the plain 40 rows, that's fine. You can stop there. But the pattern itself calls for working an edging right along the end here. So let's make the edging. Now, the edging isn't worked all the way around. What you're going to want to do is work it just along the long sides. Now, for this little swatch, because I only worked a few rows, it's much shorter than it is wide. But of course, if you make a regular blanket, it's going to be longer than it is wide. So we'll just pretend that that's what I've done here. And I've got these 2 edges along the sides here. So to make those look a little bit nicer, what you want to do is work single crochets. And I like to finish up on this row where my last row across was on the right side. I like to make that the right side for the edging, but if you prefer the other way, it doesn't really matter. It's just whichever you personally prefer. So to make the edging, what we're going to do is look for those double crochets and chain 3s. Now for a lot of patterns, and a lot of people will recommend that you work into those stitches to make the edging, but this is such a big bulky yarn with this pattern and such a simple pattern. I actually prefer to work all the way around the stitch or the chain 3 for these. You can try it both ways and decide whichever works best for you. So to begin, I'm going to go right around that first, it looks like it was a double crochet here, and join with a slip stitch so it's on the side there. Then in these first 2, or excuse me, on this double crochet, I'm going to work 2 single crochets. The instructions just say to work evenly along the side. I played around with different counts and I found that for me, working 2 single crochets in the side of each row gave me a really nice even edge. You might find a slightly different number works best for you. So you can experiment with that a little bit, but I would say start with 2. So just work 2 single crochets right around the double crochet or the chain 3 at the end of each row, like so. and this should go really quickly. So if you've got 40 rows and you're working 2 single crochets in the end of each row, then on each side you should have 80 single crochets across. So you can see that just gives it a really nice solid edge that doesn't have any weird chain threes or anything. Looks really sharp. And with this bulky yarn, it doesn't look overly bulky and it doesn't pull the stitches apart to just go ahead and work right around that chain 3 or double crochet. So that's how you make the edges. The one thing left to do is make the fringe. Now, again, the instructions on the pattern just say to put the fringe where you want it. For me personally, I like to put it between the V stitches. So not in the chain 1 space, but at the top I would put it right here, right here, right here, and right here. And then across the bottom, again, between the V stitches, just right there or right there. If you wanted to, you could put it in the chain 1 space and then maybe even put it just opposite the V stitch right there on the foundation chain. However you prefer to do it is fine. Now the pattern calls for 9 pieces of yarn for each section of fringe. That's fine if that's the way you want to do it. That is what the pattern calls for. For me, it was a little heavy. I liked it a little bit lighter than that. But what you want to do is just, you can see I've got a whole mess of it here. Whole bunch of pieces of yarn, each cut to about 22 inches in length. If you wanted really long fringe, you could cut it longer. If you wanted it really short, you could cut it really short. But start with a little bit longer than you'd like. And because you're going to be folding it in half to put it on, you actually want it to be twice as long as you want the finished fringe to be, plus a little extra ideally. So for me, when I made the fringe on my blanket, I made each one with 4 pieces of yarn. So what you want to do is get 4 pieces from your pile and line them up together on one end here. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I just cut these by laying them across a table that was about 22 inches wide. They're not going to be perfectly perfect, and that's okay. You can trim up your fringe when you're done. These are actually pretty close. I'm impressed. So what you want to do is when you've got them all lined up, is bring the ends together so that you've got a nice fold right in the center there. You can see where my finger is. That is the center of these fringe. And that's the important part I want to work with right now. So I'm going to hold that in my non-hook hand. I'm going to just do this on my little sample here. And I'm going to just go in right between these 2 V's where I want this fringe to be with my hook. Then I will put my hook right in that center fold, pull that through there, right up to the other side of the fabric here, and I'm going to yarn over with all the ends. So I've got 4 pieces of yarn, so I've got 8 ends here in my hands. So I'm going to put those all over the hook. This is where it's really handy to have a big hook. And I'm going to pull them right through, like so. And that is how you attach fringe. Of course, this is pretty loose, so I would want to tighten that up, sort of squish the sides together to make it look really nice. And then it helps too to actually go through and pull each individual strand just to get it on there really tight, and it tightens up the knot quite a bit too. One piece of advice I do have for fringe is think about what side you like better. Let me see if I can pull this up a little bit closer. You can see on this side we see the yarn coming out through the knot. If I flip it over, the fringe has a slightly different look, almost like a tassel, where you've got yarn going sideways across the top or the base, depending on how you're looking at it right there. So if you like this side better and you want this to be on the right side of your blanket, although this is pretty darn reversible, but if you really wanted this to be on the right side of your blanket, then you need to remember that you want to apply it from the wrong side. If you prefer this side, then you want to apply it from the right side. So that part's up to you. Once you've got all the fringe you want added, you just sort of comb it out straight and use a pair of scissors to cut it as straight across as you can. Getting it perfectly straight is nearly impossible, at least for me, kind of like cutting your own bangs. But one thing that can help is if you lay them all out together and then put like a yardstick over them to hold them down and then cut across that yardstick. That can help you get a little bit more of a straight edge on your fringe too. So that's really all there is to making the 5.5 hour throw from Lion Brand yarn. I hope you've enjoyed this video and I hope you give this pattern a try. Thanks so much for watching.